When you're using a graduated cylinder, you're going to need to figure out the scale that the graduated cylinder is using, or how many milliliters each of these little lines is equal to. So to do that, the process is very simple. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take two of the numbers that are marked on the graduated cylinder. So I'm going to take 400 and 300. And I'm going to subtract the bigger number and minus the smaller number. So if I take 400 minus 300, that gives me 100. Now what I'm going to do is divide that 100 by the number of spaces in between the 300 and 400. So if I look here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to take 100, divide it by 5. So if I do that, that equals 20. So what that means is each of these lines is equal to 20 milliliters. So this would be 320, 340, 360, 380, and then 400. Let's try that out with this graduated cylinder. So I'm going to choose just two of the numbers on here. It doesn't matter what two there are, you just pick two of them. So I'm going to take 15 minus the 10, which gives me 5. I'm going to divide that by the number of spaces in between. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 divided by 5 gives me 1. So that means each of these lines here would be equivalent to 1 milliliter. So if I start counting at the 10, I would count 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So now that we know the scales of these two graduated cylinders, let's try to figure out the amount of water that's in each graduated cylinder. So remember, we look at the bottom of the meniscus or the bottom of the curve. In this graduated cylinder, that would be here. So if I look over at this mark, so here's where my water line would be. That's where I want to measure. So if I'm starting at 400 and I know that I'm counting by 20s, this would be 400, 420, 440 milliliters. Let's do this graduated cylinder. So my water line is here, so there's the bottom of my meniscus, so it'll be right here. So I know that I'm counting by ones, so if I start below that water line at one of the larger numbers at 15, and I count by ones, I would have 16, 17, 18, 19 milliliters. So sometimes the water level isn't quite at one of the lines on the graduated cylinder. So what do you do in that case? So we're going to begin just like we did with the other graduated cylinders by finding the scale. So I'm going to take two of the larger numbers marked on the graduated cylinder. So I'm going to use the 2 and the 1 here. So 2 minus 1 gives me 1. And I'm going to divide it by the number of spaces in between the 2 and the 1. So if I start with the 1, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 spaces, or 10 increments. So 1 divided by 10 means that I'm going to be counting for each of those little lines by tenths. Okay, so like if I start at 1, this would be 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, and so on. So now that we found our scale, we can work on the water level. So our meniscus is here, so it's in between these two lines. So what we need to do is figure out what this measurement would be and what this measurement would be, and then go halfway in between those. So we know that we're counting by tenths, so I'm going to start at the 2 here, and I would have 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6. So this line here is 2.6. That means this line up above is 2.7. So I need the measurement that is halfway in between those two measurements, which in this case would be 2.65 milliliters. Sorry, that's a wonky 5. All right, now how do I know it's 6.5? All right, so if I have a 0 at the end here, that's just a placeholder. So I can, have those placeholder zeros here. So 60 and 70, halfway between those would be 65. So that's where I got that from. All right, so my measurement of this graduated cylinder would be 2.65 milliliters.